Okay, time to get started. Hello again. For those of you who wasn't attending the part one, you missed a lot. Just a joking. Okay, so for everyone, welcome. My name is Vladimir Melovski, and I'm I'm an MCT and MVP on Exchange. Okay. My colleague Mirko Kollenberg in the background assisting me with this session. So we two together we will today do this part two, Microsoft Office 365, and focused on mostly on the online versions of Exchange, SharePoint, and on Link. And as I mentioned, some of the topics we did on part one, which were DIRSync and ADFS, we went to them a little bit faster in order to enable people who wanted to leave that they have any overview of the topic. But now we can go back a little bit more in detail once again, spend some time on that. And in the meantime, and some of you also showed me some other resources that, like Microsoft Virtual Academy, which we can check some of the Office 365 trainings as a very good resource for learning. Office 365 admin support skills, troubleshooting with Office 365, which was one of the objectives listed in the last slides on the part one. Then we have deploying Office 365 Pro Plus. That is also part of the, as I mentioned, don't forget all the editions of Office 365, which might have an exam question to choose some of them in some specific scenario. Directory synchronization in Office 365. Okay. Office 365 troubleshooting, so plenty of Office 365 resources for learning. And this week here we have hands-on labs. They will be most probably available and after the event as well. We have, just let me scroll to this. One of the resources which is very good for practicing Office 365 Exchange online hybrid migration. So you see how to migrate on-premise Exchange to Office 365 and experience consistent hybrid deployment. I would highly recommend that you try this one if you have time. If not, then after this event. And also very good exercise on introduction to administering Office 365 with Windows PowerShell. Good for practicing. And let's go back a little bit on our part one. So we mentioned that the companies might choose to use WAAD tool or directory synchronization tool if they want to use Office 365 resources, and still they need local AD on-premise for any type of legacy or on-premise applications. So this should be a tool that you install it and configure it, and that should run automatically, replicating on every 3 hours. Then it has some capacity, how much person can replicate, but that is also something that can be configured. And we also mentioned that you might be asked, since this is on the objective leads, about how synchronization goes, or when you configure something on local AD, will it synchronize into the Office 365 environment? So be careful on those components. Okay, let me just check if something else is also some resources I have prepared. Okay. So there are tools that are needed in order that before you run DIRSync. So it is good that one of these tools is called ID Fix. You also download it from the portal, and I don't have it here on the slide, but so ID Fix is also a tool that it's needed to check and to remediate Active Directory issues. Okay. Then before you run DIRSync, you might also use, as we mentioned, on-ramp tool just to check the current state of the on-premise infrastructure and to see recommendation for the migration. Okay. Now, during this directory synchronization, read well what you can synchronize and should you synchronize password, in which scenarios. Read well the text of the exam question. Sometimes the synchronization can be OU based, so you need maybe some, let's say, marketing department. You can say on the exam in OU marketing needs to have their account synchronized. So be sure that you answer there that you choose not everyone to synchronize, but just that organizational unit. Read well the question and see what should be done. The filter can be domain-based and can be also user attribute-based, so based on some specific attribute. Okay. Now, also I would, regarding these tips and tricks on how to remember things, some of the tools are executable. Okay. So you might get question which tool to run to start this installation of the. Yeah. Be careful to know the name of the tool. Yeah, you might get like some similar names. And now here is the issue when you install, let's say, DIRSync, you don't install it 5 times. Okay, you just double-click the file and the installation goes, even in your testing environment. But be sure to know how these names of the executable files are, how the executable file is named, what is the name of the file. Also, be sure to check any PowerShell commands associated with the synchronization. Okay. Let's go on ADFS now. We already did this question previously. So we go a little bit more in detail on ADFS. So this is not something that was invented specially for Office 365. Many companies are using ADFS also for when let's say 2 companies merge, so they need to have single sign-on solution between the both Active Directory forests. But ADFS also can be used for single sign-on experience on Office 365. So the good thing we mentioned is that whenever you sign on just with one pair of credentials, you don't need for different components, different types of credentials. And since ADFS infrastructure is so vital, it's so business critical, and that's why we need to make it highly available. Otherwise, if ADFS is not available, nobody can log on, which is no matter if they are on-premise or in the cloud. Now we check how to, we'll see topics about installing and managing ADFS servers, which are needed for the users who are located inside the company, and ADFS proxy servers for users who log on from outside, from internet. So first of all, ADFS uses PKI, which means in order to work authentication to work, the PKI must be trusted. And then the certificate that we issue should be used by the ADFS must be trusted. Next, if you do, which is recommended, if you do high available solution with the ADFS, you create a farm. So one thing you be careful, create the farm at once, even it will be with one server only from the beginning. Because you cannot just create the farm after that. If you say during the wizard, I need one server, and then you say after 3 months I need a farm, then you have to recreate the farm from the beginning. So better maybe to create the farm with one server just, and then you add the next servers in the farm as well, in the same farm. Now, when you have a farm, you have multiple servers, and you have actually multiple machines with multiple names and certificate. We came again to the certificate issue, because there have to be certificate representing all servers in the farm. Okay, so what type of certificate do we need here? So we need certificate subject alternative name, which will represent all the members of the farm, and be careful to. So farm must have a name, okay, which name is not none of the servers members of the farm, but this is common name of the farm, and the certificate common name must include the name, the FQDN of the farm. Okay, so this is also something we have to be careful. Then what else? Yes, the internal topologies we mentioned. So we need high availability with multiple machines, and for the proxy server, the topology is completely different. The ADFS proxy is installed in a perimeter network, which means less secure environment than into the internal network. So ADFS proxy should be installed on the well protected between two firewalls into the perimeter network. Be sure to know how ADFS proxy is installed, the procedure step by step, and also how previously named ADFS servers are installed. So you need to know that procedure and wizard that goes next the step-by-step process. Now for ADFS to work, we have to create ADFS service account. And once we configure ADFS, the domain needs to be converted. We use PowerShell for that, from so-called standard to federated domain. Federated means ADFS is used for single sign-on. Be sure to know how to convert to federated domain. And after some time, some company might choose to go back from single sign-on to decommission the ADFS and to not use single sign-on anymore. So this is the reverse process. The domain must be converted in that case from federated to standard. So be sure to check how it is done and what process is involved and how it affects the other infrastructure. Next is managing certificate lifecycle. Since PKA is used for ADFS, expiration of the certificates might cause issues, so that certificates are not trusted anymore. So be sure to check and if there are any questions that you have, like any issues, that some of the issues might be that the certificates are expired. But one of the more important is whenever you have, whenever you have a farm, not just for ADFS, whenever you have farm of servers or cluster of servers, which are multiple machines, they usually have common name. Okay, so if the application that run on those servers is using PKA, then that common name must be assigned certificate. Okay, so usually we use certificates, subject alternative name, where the common name of the certificate is the name of the farm. This is very important to know. Now ADFS proxy, we mentioned, is configured in perimeter network. If we want high availability for single sign-on for our colleagues and users who are located at the moment outside the network, then we have to create farm with ADFS proxy machines as well, high availability, or to do some NLB, network load balancing. So be sure that you know how to install it. There is a procedural installation ADFS proxy. And since ADFS proxy also uses certificates as well, be sure that you use certificate that will also be appropriate for the NLB cluster or farm of the ADFS. Okay? Another thing that might you choose is that you create custom proxy form login page. I guess if there may be some people in the room which are a little bit more developers, they can tell us how to do that. Anyone has done with it? This config XML file? Maybe? Okay, then open the TechNet documentation and read how it is done. Okay, or check in the book if you have any of these Microsoft, if you have been on this training. So this custom proxy forms login page can be customized with different information, URLs, logos, and so on. So this can be, since it is here, I recommend that you check how it is done. Yeah. It's not like you write a code and so on, but you have to know what is the procedure. Another question, very important. Which port is used by ADFS? Excellent, great. One more correct question, so we will be very fine on the exam.
So
yes?
Do they expect a cluster of proxies and a cluster of the ADFS servers?
Of course, yes, for high availability, at least 2 of each. For high, yes, yeah. There are some resources on planning the scalability as well. I don't think it is not listed here. I don't think, since it's not on the exam objectives, I don't think it will be on the exam. But in the real world, you have to, there is some tools that you can estimate the number of the servers based on the number of the users. Since there may be many logon requests. Okay, you need to see something, or it's okay? Yeah, okay, yeah. You know, initially I wanted to make the slide with a lot of TechNet URLs, but I saw the previous days that there are issues looking at the slides because I think half of the project or the table cannot be seen from the last rows or something like that. So that's why I said, okay, let's make it more consistent, and then you just we are all experienced IT people, so whenever we see the exam objective, just go on TechNet, search for it, and you will see the complete documentation. Yeah. But also, as you saw here, MVA and these resources I mentioned, especially, I will again repeat that this Microsoft class 346 5-day class has all this and has all the labs. Very good if you have time and resources to spend 5 days in the classroom and to do a lot of interaction with the trainer also and ask him a lot of questions. Now, monitoring, you have to know which report to use in which situation. That's why, again, our old tactic. Look at the exam objective, go to the Office 365 portal and see how it's done. And also go a little bit around to see what else you can see or what else you can configure to get more knowledge. And if you have it in your company, yeah, once again, another one tip for the preparing on the company infrastructure for the exam, please any account with read-only. But in your company environment, the best thing you can prepare for the exam to see all this ongoing monitoring data or troubleshooting, because I have seen, let's say, in my virtual environment, in my test environment, I can do many tests on how to configure, how to install, how to set up. But if you have production, which runs weeks, months, you have a lot of real-life monitoring data, and you can really get a real-life knowledge on how to monitor something or how to troubleshoot something which is happening right away. Okay, so this is very good for this is very good to check in your live environment if you have them. Okay. So analyzing reports, we have multiple reports like such as service reports, and you saw some of them about status of some services. You have to know them, but it's not difficult because on the Office 365 portal you have explanation each sign and each color, what does it mean. So it is, but you have to know them for the exam. Yeah. You have arrow on the left, arrow on the like green check in the circle. Okay. Then mail protection reports regarding the and auditing logs, which also show which email has been maybe examined or has been opened by the non-owner. And then you have hygiene reports which show you the amounts of email which was being spam or with malware. Okay, so recent sent email, top malware detections, and all of that. Okay. On the dashboard, you can also see the planned maintenance. You give information report from Office 365 regarding are any planned maintenance in the future or at the moment. Are there any service update and historical data? You also have, if you have a Systems and Operations Manager, you have management pack for that one, and you can use some PowerShell commands also to read some data. Another question is how to create, how to isolate service interruption. So how to create service request. There are another tools that, here they are the tools, yeah. So I guess, how many of you use remote connectivity analyzer? Okay, almost everyone, excellent. We have it for Exchange, for Link, and now for Office 365. You also have connectivity analyzer for internal connections. There is also online service diagnostic and logging support toolkit. So most probably on the exam, when you have all these tools, you might get a question, this is happening, these are the issues, what tool should you choose? Okay, so these are the most probable questions for this monitoring. Like, for example, you cannot connect from outside and you connect from inside your company or something like that. So which of the tools would you choose? Most probably Microsoft Remote Connectivity Analyzer. Okay. You have this transport reliability IP probe as well, which is performing some tests such as speed and routes of some link clients, and this is used in browser, requires Java to have it on the browser. This was the question we already mentioned previously. What does this mean? So it was not like normal service, but it's service restored. Please be sure that you spend a little time on this, and to spend a little time to look around to see what other options are offered for this monitoring. Okay, go into these details, see what else information can you get from this. It is useful. It should be useful for exam, since it is into the exam objectives. Okay, now we go to our next slides. If you have any questions now for part 1, also during this part 2, also feel free to ask questions on part 1 as well.
What side is that you're on?
Sorry?
That previous screen, what side was that? Was that the academy?
Yes, just a moment. Yeah, it was. The first one is Microsoft Learning site, where you can see exams and trainings associated with the exams. The second one is Virtual Academy site, and the third one is the training certification guide that will show you the certification path, and you have also Windows app for that one. Anyone is taking this exam as a step towards the MCSA for something? Okay. I guess Exchange or Link or SharePoint, so it's mixed, yeah? Good. Who of you is you are also working with on-premise of these machines as well? Okay, good. If you have on-premise experience, then the part 2 will be pretty much common, because some of the topics, such as, for example, Exchange Online configuration, has very similar components and similar settings. The console is almost the same. Of course, no database creation or DAX or something.
Is that right there on the N9 side? Yeah.
Okay. So let's check once again, the same training for 2 exams. So this is not any error where it says the same training, 3, 4, 6. It is really. Usually on many Microsoft certifications, you have 1 training, 1 exam. And here it is good, it's 1 training, 2 exams. So what are the topics? First one, manage clients and end user devices. What does it mean? So we have configured our infrastructure, we created our tenant, we configured DNS, we deployed all other services. Is it like directory synchronization, or it's ADFS? So now we go to the clients and configure clients. We configure Office software on them or different settings. And next provision is provision SharePoint online site collection. So those of you who have experience with SharePoint, you already know how to do that. The difference is that now the SharePoint is hosted in Office 365, so some of the options are different. With the Exchange and the Link, guys, if you have already run with Exchange on-premise, no problem at all. Just be sure to, again, get close to the graphical interface. And the last one is planned for Exchange Online, Link Online. Most of these topics is actually migration topics, but we had, as I mentioned, on the hands-on labs, we have very good lab on migrating Exchange, for example. On the MVA, there was, and on TechEd, Channel 9, there was also a session and a lab on SharePoint migration, so you should be pretty much fine with hands-on testing how to do this migration. So we go first with the clients and end user devices. So these are some of the topics that you will see on the exam. Manage user-driven client deployments. So most of them focused on click to run on Office software. Then the second will be manage IT deployments of Office 365 Pro Plus. Then telemetry and reporting and plan for Office clients. So how to configure self-provisioning or restrict self-provisioning for Office 365 Pro Plus. Be sure to know all these system requirements, which user can start click to run, and be sure to know how Office is available on mobile devices and on tablets. And then how to activate or revoke activation of the deployments. Few information just to read how is the experience on Mac. So is it something supported? The next several topics regarding deployment of Office 365. Mirko, if you want to join also, you can. Mirko? You are the deployment guy, so if you want to add something for deploying Office, feel free to say something. Yeah. Okay, so you will be questioned here, questioned on different scenarios regarding how to manage the deployment, manage the updates using the Office deployment tool, and customize the deployments for different types of users. Then telemetry information, so you have to enable it using group policy. So this is also something that you might see on the exam, how to configure and how to enable and how to deploy the agent. Okay. The next objective is planning for Office clients. So Outlook, Link client. Now some of the plans also, or more of the plans include also Office Online. And then what is Office Web Apps and how Office Web Apps works in this environment. Okay. And differences between click-to-run and MSI deployment. How many of you have configured or used Office Web Apps? Okay, so quite good. Let's read this question. What do you think? Okay. Access documents, okay. Yeah. Sorry? Ah, okay. I guess, yeah, this is from, yeah. It should be updated, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Now the next topic is the SharePoint Online. So there are not much SharePoint information here, so you would not expect like in detail. Any one of you was attending yesterday's SharePoint exam prep? Not just you? Okay. Okay. So you see how much detail was the exam, but this was only SharePoint. So this was like for MCSA. And here, because we have multiple products in Office 365, just some components of that information is inserted. So first is configure external user sharing. So you might be asked how to, let me see if it's on the, yeah, so one of the topics is configuring external user sharing, so how external users get access to documents. Then how to create SharePoint site collection and plan a collaboration solution. So based on the different types of the security settings, which user can do what component and how do they configure different security settings for different types of users. Now there will be some scenarios on external user sharing. Okay, so how to enable it on a global level. The next is how to configure it per site collection. You might be asked about if you don't want to use that and it was configured previously, how to configure that, or just to change the level of the access. Should be read-only or should be with more administrative permissions. One other components that you will be asked is set SharePoint site collection administrator. So be sure how to do that. Practice how to configure this one. Practice all the options regarding configuring quota and warning levels. Next, configuring public websites. How many of you actually use SharePoint online, so are more confident with that one? Okay, so that's a good number. So you are confident with these topics? Pretty much? Okay. Regarding infrastructure question, if the external access is configured, also don't forget for the DNS settings and certificates. Now these were some additional components in Office 365 we mentioned previously. We have to know them. So there is no exam objective about Yammer configuration or any other work with Yammer. But here it says Yammer versus newsfeeds. So most probably you will be asked to make differentiation about specific scenario. Then the next is co-authoring. So what options and what should we choose and configure if you need to have co-authoring on some documents. Then you have project online. Since it is just a name, then it might include just for you to say in which component it is present or how to include it. Okay, then accessing file across the multiple client devices. And you have Excel services, Visio services, or Enterprise e-Discovery. Regarding Enterprise e-Discovery, be sure you are familiar how to configure and how to run the discovery. Another simple question, again, PowerShell. Which command connects to SharePoint Online for PowerShell management? 1, 2, 3, or 4? Okay. Good. Okay. So SharePoint users also have to know the PowerShell commands or be familiar with the PowerShell commands for this exam. Now the next we go to the Exchange Online and Link Online. Since you see here they are both technologies put in one group, which means not much huge details about configuration and settings. We do have one topic on migration, Exchange, and this is also important to know. This is another group of questions. But here we talk just for configuring Exchange and Link Online, so which settings we can do. So first, we'll check configuring additional email addresses for a user. So that would be scenario maybe when multiple companies or maybe some acquisitions of the companies merging are made. So we need to have additional email addresses, so users in the same tenant having different types of addresses. Then adding external contact resources and groups. Pretty much it should be similar experience, but do have a look at the graphical console regarding creating, managing external contacts. Most probably also it will be PowerShell included here on the exercise. And also we have to take a look and go through these commands to see how do they work. The next topic we're going to check is configure personal archive policies. So user can have a archive mailbox, so be aware how it is done and how this is configured. And archive can be online also as well. And the next last group of questions will be about configuring link and user communication settings.
I have a question on that.
Yes.
Are they going to go into any deep on-premise conversation about E4s, where you have an on-prem link device? Have you ever seen such a thing?
No, when I read the exam objectives, I don't see any hybrid link, like link on-premise and link online. That was the question?
Well, yeah, because E4 is one of E4's specific things over E3 is that you have link on-prem.
Okay,
So
okay.
I was just curious.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see that either, but I just thought I'd ask.
If it's not listed, then it will not be. Yeah, if it's not listed in the objectives. Any other questions? So see, this second part and 347 is mostly focused on how to do some productivity. Settings will increase productivity, like how to configure Exchange, how to configure link on SharePoint. Not much system and an IT Pro deep infrastructure settings. Especially, there is only one component where we're going to see about Exchange migration. So that would be, let's say, like more deep dive technical question that you might get again. So what else we might be asked to do or to answer about? Changing the default reply to address if we have multiple addresses configured. And again, adding multiple users to the domain. How to manage other email addresses. So there is nothing more. I wouldn't say it's much more difficult. That it's very common that we do every day in our environments. And also manage SIP addresses for link configuration as well. Next list of the topics is also something we do pretty much every day during the on-premise machines. So creating and managing resource mailboxes. How many of you have Exchange experience online or on-premise? So we are all good. What does it mean? Okay. Yeah. Okay, creating external contacts. So this is all day by day, our day by day job, so we will be pretty much familiar with it. Okay. Now, how many of you use this personal archive? Okay, not that much. Okay. Now we have to know it for the exam. Okay, so this is our second mailbox, and on the second mailbox we can configure when those old emails go to the archive. We can do them manually, or we can configure different types of policy that automatically move them into the archive. And how many of you use this retention policy, retention tags? Okay, not like less than a half. Okay. So this is also something we have into the Exchange on-premise. So you have to check how it works, how it is configured in this enterprise, in this online version of Exchange. Do not forget to know what is the process of doing that. Okay, you might be asked about how to configure that one. Okay. And then how to apply retention policy to the mailboxes. So you might have multiple retention policies. For example, they delete email after some amount of time. They may move the email into the archive after some amount of time. So depending on the company policy, you might have this. You might be asked to configure this. Don't forget that if you are asked about configuring some policies that do not apply to everyone, like in the tasks that you'll need to perform, is that you do some policy. That policy you don't apply policy to all company, to all people from the company. Read the scenario. If it says that some different types of users need different types of policies, then it will mean that we have to create different types of policy and apply them to different type of people. And also, if they're configuring, we should also know to modify the default retention policy. Okay. Configuring some link settings. So first, do we know how to, again, link users, administrators? Okay, good. We have to be familiar with the interface, how to turn off the non-archive features if it is needed for compliance. You might know that the link cannot archive everything, such as one-to-one audio and video, so some companies might need to turn those settings off. Then be sure that you are confident in how to configure the presence settings and configure which services should be available on the link online. Okay. And configure external per user external communication. How to configure external communication for the user. So all this, if you have been working with SharePoint, then you need to read a little bit about the link. I would not recommend, let's say if you're like SharePoint person, then you go deep dive into the link on premise, how it works, and then you go for this exam, because most probably you'll have to focus on these objectives. Yeah, because it will take you a lot of time learning about on-premise link features, which not everything of that is applicable in this exam. So just focus on this configuration set. Go into the console and see what options for link do you have. Create also a test link account, so configure different options, see how the changes apply to the link account. Try to turn off, turn on some features, and have more experience with that. Okay. Okay. Now we have another question. You need to configure public instant messaging conversation for link users. What settings do you have to enable? Choose all that apply, it says. Yeah, so look at the, if you see choose all that apply, then it means that the multiple answers might be correct. Okay. Is it?
I think that I thought that items 2 and 3 were radio buttons, not mutually exclusive.
They're not. They are not. Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, we don't have them here with the. Yeah.
You can't select all 3, but they apply.
If it's radio button, you cannot say it should be like some kind of checkbox, I guess.
No, I mean in the online service. Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm. Ah, the online service. Okay.
That's, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now the last part of this exam is planning for Exchange Online and Link Online. So first group of questions is configuring anti-malware and anti-spam policies. Next one is recommend. You see, recommend mailbox migration strategy. It doesn't says migrate. Okay. However, I would like for you to read a little bit more about how migration of Exchange is. So it is quite some process for different companies. It maybe have involved multiple steps. So for the read a little bit more, but here it says recommend. Because it says recommend, that might mean that you will be given a scenario and there are multiple types of the migration strategies. So they will not say like how do you migrate this? They might say recommend which of the strategies is applicable for this solution. However, if you have time, I would really like you to read a little bit more about mailbox migration to see how it is done and which components are included. Okay, I have some more information here. Okay. Then plan for Exchange Online. Also includes some steps in our capacity planning and network planning as well. And manage the global external communication settings for links. Who can connect to Link Online and which features it can use. Okay. What can we do? So actually anti-malware and anti-spam policy is part of the additional product which is called Exchange Online Protection. How many of you has configured Exchange Online Protection? Good. So it's not a big problem. I guess it's pretty much easy to configure, pretty much intuitive. So since you are, for those of you who haven't tried that, there is also option to have it as a separate product, Exchange Online Protection. So some companies choose to have on-premise Exchange and use Exchange Online Protection just as a cloud-based anti-spam and anti-malware solution. Okay, and then these MX records point to the Exchange Online Protection, and then SMTP is routed through the cloud, and then it goes back to the on-premise Exchange machines, just as an information. So here are some of the options you might configure. Configure the quarantine, then configure spam confidence level. Next, we can do white and blacklisting by our own and configure notifications. And as you saw in the part 1, we had a lot of rich reporting regarding the anti-spam and antivirus. Planning for Exchange includes also, as we mentioned previously, adding MX records. So we said first TXT should be like the primary record we add in order to prove our domain ownership. But next to that, we have to add MX because now emails will not go on-premise, they will go in Office 365. So, yes?
In order to manage ELP, what group do you have to be a member of? The global admin group?
Most probably, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's an issue.
Yes?
Because being a global admin, you also have access to billing and everything else. If you have a team for just the ELP admin, those guys have rights to the kingdom. What they do in order to manage ELP. So do you know of any things coming down?
I will have to check that. Yeah, I'll have to check.
They're supposed to be getting more roles. They just announced it. They
Yeah.
just announced
Yeah,
it.
we've been hearing that, but I was just
Okay.
wondering if you had any insight about when that's going to happen.
No, I don't have for extra, sorry. Yeah. Okay, now it's the big story here. Usually for, I guess, some of you who said that you are consultants and you put users on board have been dealing a lot with this. So good news for you on the exam, we haven't seen many objectives like in detail how to do that, and you don't need to go all through that once again. Most probably you recommend. Okay, so scenario, and then the scenario will tell you which version of Exchange it is, how many users we have, which protocol they use, and so on. And based on that scenario, you choose these types of migrations. Okay, so there is I guess on TechNet there is a very table that it will show you in which scenario what is applying. Okay, so usually you go depending on the company requirements. So some companies want to have migration that they have large number of mailboxes, so they really do not have a chance to do it faster, and then they have to have hybrid deployment, which means for a relatively longer time they will be on-premise Exchange server, on-premise Active Directory, and online. So some of the users are gradually moved from time to time. So we have to establish for them scenario where they are not interrupted in their work, but still the mailboxes are in stages moved into the Office 365. So some of these companies, and in this hybrid scenario, there is option that you move the mailbox back as well. So until you still have the on-premise infrastructure as you had. So some companies want to have some of their mailboxes on-premise and some in the cloud. So for this, for them, we have a so-called hybrid migration strategy. And there is a one, let's say, like block diagram of questions and answers. So how to decide which migration. Basically, there are 4 types of migrations. So mostly, let's say, if the on-premise machine is Exchange, then you can do hybrid, staged, and cutover. So cutover is usually we do as the name says, we do the migration over the short amount of time, and it is something we do with basically with the when there are less number of users in the company, and it is also done during the non-working hours. Okay, and then stage type of migration is that we have more number of the users, and then the migration goes until all the users are migrated. Hybrid still, as we mentioned, we still remain the on-premise infrastructure, and the IMAP is made, basically it can be made on third-party systems who also use IMAP connection. So for you to decide, I have here actually one change migration. I have one slide, but I will show it to you later after you come. This is not part of this slide. And this is like block diagram that based on different questions, which says, for example, what is the current email server? For example, it's Exchange. So which Exchange version? Then if it's old, and by old I mean 2003 or something, in that case, do you need long-term mail consistency? If it's no, then you go with cutover migration. So if it's like, if you have later Exchange server, how many users they are. If there are less users, then you can go with the stage. And if there are more users, they can also use with the hybrid. And if depends on if customer still wants to have this on-premise infrastructure. And once again, be sure for which scenario what to choose. Okay, so it says recommend. It means decide what type of migration would be. Next, plan for exchange online. Plan client requirements for archive. So how many of the users want to have archive enabled or basic on the company requirements. Archiving can be done on different types of the organization, user who work in the organization. Then we can configure e-discovery. Anyone uses e-discovery or configured? That's quite a big number. Since I'm from Europe, not many companies is using that, except some companies that work really with very, very strict security information. So manage e-discovery and enabling legal hold, which will put mailboxes on hold. That means that we configure that in order that no email will be deleted. Configuring Outlook web app access. This is something also we do. Of course, we don't forget here the DNS records needed so that we connect to the Outlook web access. And configuring active sync. Also, DNS configuration is needed so that also for including the auto-discover, so that mobile devices connect automatically to the exchange. All of these pretty much have their settings and in the on-premise version, so if you have been working with on-premise, you will be pretty much comfortable with those as well. Okay. And global settings for link server. So we have enabling external access, which means that people can connect with their link client from anywhere they are located. Then managing the domains in link. How many of you have configured public instant messaging connectivity? How many of you need it? Okay. So this is something that also you should know how to configure. It will be, you will be asked most probably for different scenario to say to connect. Don't forget that since public instant messaging needs to be configured, maybe for some users yes, maybe for some users no. So be aware of that one, that you have to also know how to disable it as well after it has been configured. Customize meeting invitations. So meeting invitations include information in there such as URLs and company logo and some other information. And also being sure that you know how to configure that one. Then when you do connectivity with instant messaging, have you configured disclaimers so far? Yeah, so this might be also a question as well. Okay. Again, one question. Now, this is the recommendation question, as we mentioned previously. So we need to migrate 2010 of, this is good, 1001 users. You want to preserve users' OST files. And which, sorry?
Stage migration.
Okay. Okay, so in remote move, actually, still we have hybrid configuration where the local machine is still present. Okay. So the answers that would guide you is a version of the on-premise Exchange machine, if it is Exchange, or if it's third-party system. and also number of the users. So these are the information that might give us an answer what type of migration should we choose. Okay, so I guess we are pretty much almost done, a little bit earlier. But we have some time for questions, so if you have any other question, feel free to ask. Let's just display once again all these resources. So for all of you who haven't been in exam, want to see the experience, we mentioned we don't have Exchange, we don't have Office 365 simulations, but we have some others. So Microsoft Learning, Virtual Academy, and we mentioned also these resources such as Labs, Office Ignite, Channel 9, and hands-on labs you have here. Thank you very much. Yes.